What is up, guys? TopTierYugioh here, and today I've got a white forest deck profile for you guys. This build is a little different from standard builds because I'm not playing Runics, Centurions, or Toy Box cards, but instead I'm playing Fiendsmith and Kashtira engines to cover up for the white forest archetype's weaknesses while also capitalizing on their incredible strengths. And so definitely stick around because this will be an in-depth look into the deck along with some combos and test hands as well. But before we get into it, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more White Forest content because I've really fallen in love with this deck. It's so much fun and there is so much potential as well. But let's go ahead and get into it. We're going to start this off with 3 copies of Astellar of the White Forest. This is the best card in the entire deck, and that is an amazing compliment considering that there are Fiendsmith cards in this deck as well, so that's saying a lot. But when this card is on the field, you can send a spell or trap from your hand or field to the graveyard to special summon a white forest monster from your deck. And then if it's in the graveyard, if a spell or trap is sent to the graveyard to activate a monster card effect, you can special summon it back. Next, we have 3 copies of LZ of the White Forest, which is the other starter card of the engine, and what it does is that when it's in your hand, you can send a spell or trap from your field or hand to the graveyard to special summon it, and then add a white forest monster from your deck to your hand. It also has a graveyard effect similar to Astellar to where it can give you some recursion, so Astellar summons itself back when you send a spell or trap to activate a monster effect. LZ adds itself back to hand if a tuner monster is special summoned on your opponent's turn. The other thing to note is that both of these are level 2 non-tuners with 0/0 stats. And now to wrap up for the White Forest monsters, we have 1 copy of Sylvie and then 1 copy of Rusia. These are both level 4 tuners, and they both also have 2 effects. And so Sylvie's effect is when normal summoned or special summoned, you can add a white forest spell or trap to your hand. Rusia's effect is that when it's on the field, you can send a spell or trap from your hand or field to the graveyard in order to draw 1 card. And then both of them have the graveyard quick effect to where you can shuffle back a white forest synchro monster and then special summon itself from the graveyard. So if you kind of look at your monsters like this, you have your 4 normal summons typically and then 4 special summons. LZ and Rusia will almost always be special summoned. Astellar and Sylvie will almost always be normal. Well, maybe not Sylvie, but Astellar will almost always be normal summoned. And it is practically the only card that you want to normal summon in this entire deck. And if you can special summon it, that's better too, but it's just difficult to set that up on turn 1. And now, you might be wondering why I'm only playing 1 copy of Sylvie and Rusia if they're so good. Sylvie can search your spell or traps, Rusia can draw you a card, both of them can summon themselves back from the graveyard for free. Why would I only play 1 of each? And quite frankly, there are many reasons to not play more of these cards. And I think it really highlights a lot of the issues that this deck has, the first one being normal summons. So, you don't want more copies of Sylvie because you don't want too many normal summons. Sylvie also searches the spell and traps, but these spell and traps don't really do anything in your hand. For example, it could search you a copy of Tails, but Tails doesn't really do anything except search another White Forest monster. But if you normal summon Sylvie, search for Tails, use Tails to search for another monster, you're not searching for the best one because you've already normal summoned. You can search for one of these, but then you would need another spell or trap to summon LZ, for example. And if you summon Rusia, then you just have 2 tuner monsters on board. And what do you do with 2 tuners in a synchro deck? Not really anything. So Sylvie on its own doesn't really do anything. That's if you search Tails. If you search Woes, well, it's a trap card. You're not doing too much with a trap card on turn 1 typically. So that's why I also only play 1 copy of Tails and Woes. And so playing more copies of Sylvie would increase the number of normal summons as well as it doesn't search for anything that's actually useful. More copies of Rusia, however, could work. It could be pretty good because it does help you play through disruption sometimes, especially if Astellar gets hit by any hand trap at all. But then following up with Rusia can be pretty good, especially if you have extra spells and traps in your hand or field that you can use for material for the other effects. Then yeah, Rusia can be really good. So I have considered playing more copies of that, but definitely not more than 1 copy of Sylvie. And so that actually highlights another major weakness of the White Forest engine, that being its weakness to hand traps. And so Astellar by far is the best card in the archetype, but most of the time it's a normal summon that you are then sending a spell or trap to the graveyard for cost to activate its effect. And that is a huge investment into the play. Your normal summon, a spell or trap, it's a lot. And it loses or it gets affected by basically every single hand trap that's being played right now. It gets affected by Ash Blossom, it gets affected by Imperm, Veiler, and there's not really many ways you can play around it either. So you really have to protect yourself from those hand traps. And that's what some of the other engines in this deck allow you to do, and it's why I chose the engines I chose. And so yeah, that's the White Forest engine that I'm playing in this list. 3 copies of Astellar, 3 LZ, 1 Sylvie, 1 Rucia, 1 Tails, and 1 Woes. And then again, to clarify on the Tails one more time, not playing more copies of Tails because first of all, it requires an illusion or a spellcaster monster on the field to even activate, but then it only searches more monsters, and your combos don't start with a bunch of monsters. They start with like 1 or 2 monsters and a bunch of spells or traps. So you want a Stellar and a spell card. That's your main combo, not a Stellar plus another monster. You can't have a Stellar plus Sylvie to search a spell or trap either, because both of them will be your normal summon. So you really don't want like more monsters, and all this does is get you monsters. So 1 copy is good. The other thing to note is that whenever Tails or Woes are sent to the graveyard to activate a monster effect, then they are set back to your spell and trap card zone. And that's really the best usage of Tails. I think I use that effect more than the actual searching effect in this deck. Like I just use this as like free fodder for the effects more than searching, because just searching doesn't do anything. But yeah, that's it for the White Forest cards. And then now for the Fiendsmith cards, we have 3 copies of Engraver, 1 copy of Tract, and then 1 copy of Fabled Lurie. Pretty standard, and I get it. I can hear the collective sigh of every rogue deck player, everybody who wants to play White Forest and then sees the Fiendsmith engine splashed into it. Like I hear the collective sigh, but trust me, this isn't just tossed into this deck, you know, willy-nilly off of a whim just because Fiendsmiths go in every single deck or they make every deck better. Like yes, but also no. There is a lot more to it for this specific combination of engines. There is synergy, and the main one is that the Fiendsmith engine provides you with both monsters that you can synchro with. Like the level is actually extremely convenient on Engraver and Lacrima, but it also provides you spell and traps because you can equip the Link monsters to the field as spell cards and then send them as a cost for your White Forest monster effects. And so you get bodies, you get spells and traps. That is everything that you need. But it can also protect you from hand traps, which is one of the bigger weaknesses of the White Forest deck. It can either bait them out, or if your opponent has nothing, you can go into Appaloosa to guarantee that your plays go through. But it's not only that, it also solves the other issue of there being only 6 good White Forest monsters, being the 3 copies of Astellar and 3 copies of LZ. Well, remember, both of those, as well as your tuners, do have graveyard effects, and the Fiendsmith engine allows you to go into Beatrice. You can send whatever you need to the graveyard and then bridge to them. That's actually very relevant because it not only helps your plays go through, but it makes the deck more consistent. And that is something that you don't get out of the Runic engine, the Toy Box engine, or the Centurion engine. Like none of those make the deck more consistent, as well as protecting them from hand traps. Those engines all raise the ceiling of the deck. They turn this deck into crazy wombo combo, calamity lock, like just crazy boards, sure. But this deck is built around actually resolving your own effects and actually getting to play, not just losing to a couple of hand traps like those ones. And then the other thing about Beatrice, which you can get from this engine, is that not only can it send cards like Astellar that can summon themselves back to the field, it can also send you spells and traps that you can add back to your hand off of Diabel. There's just so much synergy. I'm going to show you guys later. I'm going to show you all the combos, or at least the basic ones in this video. I think I'll do another like larger combo video at a later point to show you guys like all the plays, because it's actually a lot. It's kind of crazy. But yeah, the Fiendsmith engine allows you to play through hand traps. It bridges to the White Forest engine, as well as making it stronger by being able to send any spell or trap you want to the graveyard that you could then add back with Diabel. So Fiendsmith cards. And now the final engine that I'm playing is the Kashtira engine, and this is maybe the most surprising to a lot of people. Nobody expected this at the regional. Like when I'm discarding Birth off of effects, they're like, what is happening? Or when you start with like Planet, people just they just think you're on like Kashtira. They're not thinking anything else. So they're stopping this, they're stopping the unicorn that you search with this. Like this just makes people makes opponents play very weirdly. It's kind of hilarious actually. But yeah, we're playing the 4 copies of Planet, we're playing the Unicorn, as well as the Fenrir to give you some utility going second. And then with the Unicorn, there's a copy of Birth. Now, there's so much to say about this, because Planet on its own gives you 2 bodies and 2 spells, because you have Planet, search Unicorn, Unicorn, search Birth. Once you link away the Unicorn, Birth can bring it back. So you have 2 spells, 2 bodies. Not to mention, if your opponent hand traps you at any point within their combo, you're going to be able to activate Unicorn and rip apart their extra deck. if you just have a Unicorn and Birth on your field, your opponent literally cannot play Fiendsmith cards into them, because you can just banish their Requiem or banish the Lure out the graveyard. Like, it is... These cards are very, very good in this current format. And then Fenrir gives you some utility going second, but also it makes it to where if you open up multiples, you can always just go like Unicorn, Birth, summon Fenrir, or like Fenrir, search Unicorn. If you already have Birth, then just normal summon it, and then you have 2 monsters, go on the Moon, Requiem, full Fiendsmith play. So, and again, the Fiendsmith play goes into your White Forest play. So, opening up Unicorn plus Fenrir, for example, is full White Forest combo. Like, that's a crazy interaction. Or just like Planet plus any hand trap or anything, like 2 bodies on board is full White Forest combo. Like, that's insane. So these are also really good, but they also solve another issue that this deck has, being that it's extremely weak in simplified game states. Because again, think about Astellar, the best card of the engine. You have the normal summon, send a Speller Trap to the graveyard to then summon something from your deck. But if you don't have a Speller Trap to send, or if it gets interrupted, the deck can be very weak in simple game states. You need a lot of cards to really play this, to play the White Forest engine optimally, and the Kashtira engine gives you a lot of cards on one hand, but it also is very good to just play on its own in like those simple game states. Just like having a Unicorn, like let's say you and your opponent both hand trap each other a lot, and you pass on Unicorn Birth. Okay, you got a body or a part of their extra deck, you get another turn. Next turn, you do the same thing, you rip another card of their extra deck, you keep bringing it back. Keep bringing back the Unicorn. Like, you can whittle down their resources over time with just big bodies, resolving Unicorn's effect, Fenrir, banishing stuff off the field. It's very, very good, actually. I honestly thought about even playing a Rise Heart, just because that would make it to where Fenrir itself is 2 bodies, whereas Unicorn on its own isn't 2 bodies. Like, you can't search for Unicorn and then get Birth and then get another monster on the board. You already need another monster that you can summon. Whereas you could go Planet, Fenrir, search Rise Heart, normal Rise Heart, and then now you have 2 bodies going to Moon and then play from there. But Rise Heart's too much of a break. Like, Rise Heart doesn't synergize with the deck at all, really, outside of just being a monster. And then it and then it also is weak in a simple game state, unlike Unicorn and Fenrir. The only real brick of the engine is Birth, but at least Birth is a Speller Trap that you can send as a cost for your effects, and you can always just add it back later if you need it. And then it's being good in simplified game states is the main reason that I chose this over the Toy Box engine, because the Toy Box cards on their own just don't do anything. Like, if you're in a if you only have 1 card, you do not want it to be a Toy Box card. But if you only have 1 card, I would love for it to be a Planet. I'd love for it to be a Unicorn or a Fenrir. That'd be pretty good. But the Toy Box cards, no, they don't do anything on their own. And that's a big issue that I have with them. Alright, so now moving on to the non-engine. This is the most boring part of the deck, because every single deck in the current format is playing an absurd number of non-engine. And I think if you can't play at least 12 to 15 hand traps, at least, your deck probably isn't worth playing, to be honest. It's just, you need a lot for the Snake Eye deck. You need a lot for most decks right now in order to stop them. Like, there was one match at the regional. Yeah, round 1 actually. Round 1, I was playing against Hand Trap Tempai, right? And he has Ash Imperm. I'm able to play through Ash Imperm and full combo. Like, that's insane. That's why you need, you need a lot of hand traps, which is why I am playing 3 copies of Ash Blossom, 3 copies of Nibiru, 3 copies of Effect Veiler, and 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. This is pretty standard, but the next hand trap is one of my favorites in the entire deck, that being 3 copies of Dominus Purge. This card is insane for so many reasons. Like, first of all, I think the elephant in the room regarding this card is the fact that you cannot activate dark, water, or fire monster effects after you use the effect from hand. But the main thing is, from hand, you can still set it, and then you're not affected by that restriction. But then also, the only other dark monsters, the only other dark, fire, or water monster in the entire main deck is Ash Blossom, which, the odds of drawing both of them together is relatively low. If you do draw them together, you can just set the Dominus Purge if you're going first. If you're going second and draw both of them, then you can just activate the Ash Blossom first, and then you don't have to worry about it. Like, it's super easy to play around. It's not really an issue at all. It never came up once. It has not come up for me once since playing this deck. I'm sure it will eventually, but it's very, very rare. Dominus Purge in general, though, is really good because you're stopping most of the starter cards in other decks. And then the fact that it destroys the card as well is very, very huge. So, like, if you think about like Ash and Imperm, if you're playing against Snake Eyes, Ash and Imperm can negate like a Snake Eye Ash, but the downside of that, or a Diabellstar, but the downside of them is that they stay on the board. And so your opponent just like summons another one, you have to negate that too, and then they have the 2 bodies that they can use to go in the Moon, Requiem, full Fiendsmith combo. That's the issue with this format and having to play so many hand traps and how they play through so many. Like, you're not removing the body, but now random bodies turn into combos. So the thing about Dominus Purge is it negates the effect and destroys it. And so normal summon Snake Eye Ash, Dominus Purge, negate and destroy. Now they don't have that body anymore. So what happens in a lot of cases, especially if you draw a super combo of like Imperm and Purge. So summon Witch, Imperm it, normal summon Ash, Purge it, negate and destroy. Now they have to get another body on board somehow. So they need like a 3rd extender that is not like a normal summon. So it would have to be Bonfire, which is like, sure, if they got it, they got it. But if it was like Imperm Veiler or like Imperm Ash or Ash Veiler, like it wouldn't work the same. Like you would just lose to the Witch Ash. So Dominus Purge is really good. And then the last hand trap I played, which was the 42nd card added to the list, is Drolan Lockbird. And the main reason I played this was, well, for one, to have more hand traps, but 2, as a cross out target, because I am also playing 1 Called by the Grave, and then 3 copies of Crossout Designator, because once again, hand traps really hurt this deck, and Droll was one that was coming up over and over and over again. So initially I was playing 41 cards, and then I just added the Droll as a 42nd card, and I might do the same thing again and add a Druid's Worm as the 43rd card, because increasing the number of cards in the deck, a couple of cards, doesn't really make a huge difference. However, having things for Crossout would be big, and as more people are adding Bestials into their main decks, it is becoming an increasingly dangerous issue for this deck, because the entire archetype is light. And they all have graveyard effects. The Fiendsmith engine is also all light with graveyard effects. And so it makes Bestials very, 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 very good against this version of the White Forest deck. Now, the other cool thing about them all being light is that, yeah, that's one of the reasons you get to play Purge for free, basically. But it does make you extremely weak to Bestials, and that is something I'm very fearful of right now. And maybe it means that Bell should be maybe more of a consideration as like a counter side, but it feels weird to side an unsearchable card of my opponent's unsearchable cards. That's typically something I try to avoid, but with the impact that they do have, it might be worth trying. At least playing it in the main. I at least might add that Druid's Worm to the main deck, because it is a level 6 Dark Monster, which is going to help you with your synchro plays, especially going into Light Dark Chaos Angel, but also can help you break your opponent's board. So Druid's Worm has more utility outside of just being a cross-out target or a random hand trap or something. My only other fear with it is having another card that might conflict with Purge, and then also it might conflict with the Kashtira cards if I have a monster on board already, but I'll test it out. I'll let you guys know how that goes, but it's definitely something that I am considering. But that's it for the main deck. It is a 42 card main deck as is, and that was 20 non-engine cards. 20. Yeah, it's a lot. But let's go ahead and move into the extra deck. Starting off with 1 copy of Diabel, Queen of the White Forest. Then we have 1 copy of Silvera, and then 1 copy of Arciella. So your level 6 synchros are also tuners, and so the way that kind of flows is that you'll summon your level 2 non-tuner, your LZ or your Astellar. That'll get you to one of your tuners, your Sylvie or your Lucia. That'll get you to your synchro tuners, Arciella or Silvera, and then you can climb up to Diabel, which is a level 8 non-tuner synchro, the boss monster of the deck, the boss babe, if you will. But all of these cards are very, very powerful. So Diabel is the boss monster for sure, but people underestimate how good Arciella and Silvera are. So Arciella has the effect that when summoned, you can send a spell or trap card from your hand or field to the graveyard, then add a light spellcaster monster or a White Forest card from your deck to your hand. Now, we've already talked about how White Forest cards in general are not very good to add to your hand. That's why I'm only playing 1 copy of Tails. But it can search any light spellcaster monster, including Effect Veiler. And that's actually very, very big. Like, the ability to just add Veiler to your hand as extra disruption can be huge, but there are times where you will search a White Forest spell or trap, or a monster if need be. But Veiler I think is a cool one. Sometimes I will search Tails just to have like extra spell and trap fodder for more effects later down the road, but yeah, it's really good. It also makes it to where your illusion and synchro monsters cannot be destroyed by battle, and they gain, cannot be destroyed by card effect, then they gain 500 attack. Then you have Silvera. When Silvera is special summoned, not synchro summoned, special summoned, also this is when special summoned as well, not synchro summoned, but when Silvera is special summoned, you can change all face-up monsters on your opponent's side of the field to face-down defense. So, Book of Eclipse is really good, but also, it gives your illusion and spellcaster synchro monsters 500 more attack and double piercing. So, Book of Eclipse that gives double piercing is nuts. This is also your main way of like OTKing opponents, and so they commit multiple monsters to the board, you summon out Silvera on their turn to disrupt them, flip their monsters face down, then on your turn you summon your synchros, they all gain 500 attack for both of these and double piercing, and so you'll have 3000 double piercing, 2900 double piercing, 3500 double piercing over any three, well, I'll say any three monsters in the current format and face down defense getting double pierced through is game usually. So that's really good. And then Diabell we haven't talked about yet. And so when Diabell is summoned when using a synchro tuner, you can add back any spell and trap card from your graveyard to your hand. Any spell and trap card, not White Forest card, any spell or trap card. It's actually insane. You can add back like Imperm, Dominus Purge, Planet, Birth, any spell and trap that we've seen. Like a lot of times I'll even use Beatrice to dump floodgates and then add them back with Diabell, and you keep looping them like that over and over. It's actually nuts. And then when your opponent activates a card or effect, quick effect, you can send a spell or trap from your field or hand to the graveyard, and then special summon a synchro tuner from your extra deck. But it is not just the extra deck, actually. That's something that a lot of people mistake. It can also summon them from the graveyard or the banish zone. And so sometimes people will misplay and they'll like banish these off of like a bestial, and you just summon it back. And then the only reason that I'm playing one copy of each and not more is that you can infinitely recycle them with your tuners, because again they all have the graveyard effect to shuffle back a synchro monster, summon themselves from the graveyard. So you like will summon it, shuffle it back, and then just summon it again. Summon it, shuffle it back, summon it again. If they get banished, they're in the graveyard. This can summon them back from the graveyard. So you have infinite access to all of them. And one thing that this deck has in general that a lot of other decks don't have is a certain level of efficiency with their disruptions. And so again, we can almost infinitely loop your synchro monsters. If we move on to the Fiendsmith cards, they can be played infinitely, whereas a lot of other decks do not have the ability to do that. So it's the efficiency that this deck has that is one of the major advantages of it, and allows you to play the control very, very well. You don't always have to be so aggressive because you know that you can just keep recurring your resources over and over and over again. But yeah, moving on to the Fiendsmith stuff, we've got the copy of Moon, we've got a Requiem, Sequence, Lacrima, and Desiree. Standard 5 that you're going to see in every single list. But Desiree, I think, is actually very, very big in this deck because it gives you some spell and trap negation. I mean, it's an Omni negate, but spell and trap is actually big in this deck because Silvera is your main form of interaction normally, but Silvera only affects monsters. Whereas with this, now you have the ability to control your opponent's monsters with Silvera and spells and traps with Desiree, which is actually very, very big. So that's like the standard Fiendsmith cards that we're playing, but on top of that, to bolster the Fiendsmith engine, we're playing one copy of Necroquip, which is also a level 6 dark monster. Once again, that's very, very relevant for synchros as well as for Xyz summoning into cards like M7 and then Beatrice. M7 was a late addition to the deck, but I ultimately liked it a lot because it allowed you to turn two bodies into like the full Fiendsmith combo instead of having to just make like a Beatrice or something, whereas Beatrice doesn't really do anything on its own. You need another body with the Beatrice to go into Barricade Borg Blocker, which I had to search extensively through the entire Yu-Gi-Oh database to find a generic link to. It's two monsters with different names. It doesn't even have to be effect monsters, but it is the only generic link to that would send a spell or trap to the graveyard as a cost to activate its effect, because what that does is if you Beatrice send a copy of Astellar to the graveyard, Barricade Borg Blocker effect, revive the Astellar effect, full combo from there. It's the exact same thing that Snake Eyes do with Promethean Princess, like Beatrice, dump Ash, go into Princess, revive the Ash effect, full combo. Same exact thing here. It's actually insane. This is Promethean Princess. kind of. But yeah, that's the bridge between them, and it makes your White Forest engine so much more consistent than it normally would be. But then, and I'll show you the combo for it later as well. And then the other extra deck monsters that we play are one copy of Lina, one Selene, and then finally one Appaloosa. All of these just make sense. Lina is super interesting because with the Fiendsmith cards out now, you have a lot of access to your Fiendsmith cards, and it's something that a lot of other decks aren't playing just because naturally the Fiendsmith engine takes up a lot of extra deck space, so you don't get to play a lot of extra cards. But Lina is one that actually comes up a lot because let's say your opponent gets to their Fiendsmith engine but we haven't. Well, we can go like, let's say we normal summon Astellar. Astellar gets disrupted. Special summon Rusia. Rusia go into Lina. Lina take their Engraver. Engraver go into Requiem. Requiem into our own Engraver. And then we can just do our full Fiendsmith combo like that. And then link up to Selene. Not access code. You can play access code. That was like the 17th or 18th card in the extra deck if I could play one. Access code is actually big. It's very good. But yeah, like Lina is very, very good in this current format. Selene as well. Selene is something I might move to the... Honestly, both of these could go to the side deck because I'd really want to play Chaos Angel in the main extra deck, but right now Chaos Angel is actually in the side deck, and one of these might go to the side deck to make up for it because Chaos Angel is just incredible. Chaos Angel is another way to remove your opponent's cards, but I don't think you always need it because a lot of times you're flipping them face down and just piercing over them, so banishing their monsters isn't really that important. You're not summoning this on your opponent's turn because it's better to just summon this on your opponent's turn. It's better to have a Book of Eclipse than to have a one card monster removal. So you're oftentimes using this for both defense and offense, so you really don't need Chaos Angel, but there are these niche scenarios where you would like to have it. It's also big. Also, it protects all of your other synchro monsters. So if you have like Chaos Angel plus Arciella, now your monsters are unaffected by monster effects, can't be destroyed by card effects. All of your synchros, which granted is only these 4, but that's still very, very huge. Especially if the Chaos Angels meet with a dark monster like Necroquip Princess or a Bestial. Then they can't be destroyed by battle either, which is something else that comes up a lot. If you were to go into like Chaos Angel plus Appaloosa, like Light Dark Chaos Angel Appaloosa, now they can attack over the Appaloosa, you're getting all of those negates. And some decks just simply can't deal with Chaos Angel. Like, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think Snake Eye can actually deal with a Light Dark Chaos Angel at all in their entire main deck, unless they draw like Infinite Impermanence and then save it for this and have nothing on board to maybe do it, because if they set it, you can just remove it from the field with like its own Chaos Angel's effect or something. So it's like, this is actually game in a lot of cases. So that's it for the extra deck and the first card of the side deck. Also for the side, we are going to be playing the most popular side deck card right now, Molcharmi Perulia. We've also got what I think is probably the best hand trap right now, 3 copies of Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood. Then we also have 3 copies of Skill Drain. The really cool thing about Skill Drain in this deck is that, so you can be locking your opponent out of the game with Skill Drain, right? Then you can summon out an Astellar, use a Stellar effect, send Skill Drain for cost. Now that Skill Drain is off of the board, Astellar can resolve. And so you can turn off the floodgates whenever you want. And then later on in your combo, you just add it back with Diabell, set it again, and then you have combo plus Skill Drain. So that comes up a lot actually. It works with every single floodgate. You can also send this with Beatrice, add it back off of Diabell. So very, very good with that. And in a similar fashion, I'm also playing a copy of Anti-Spell Fragrance in the side, and then a copy of Zombie World. This is something I was testing because I think a lot of decks really struggle with Zombie World actually. So Tempai, all of their synchros require dragons. Most of their effects require fire dragons actually, and so being zombies is quite the hindrance for them. And so with that, I was also playing a copy of Metaverse. Oh, also Yubel requires fiends. Doesn't really do too much against Snake Eyes. It does stuff against like random decks too. Like it was solid. But I was also playing Secret Village of the Spellcasters, which it kind of conflicts with because you can't play both at the exact same time. You can't have two field spells on the board and both hurt a lot of the same decks. Like Tempai also cannot out this, and I found myself going for this against Tempai more than the Zombie World because this meant that they can't Raigeki, Dark Hole, Dark Ruler, Droplets, none of that stuff. Like they're not breaking your board with just monsters either, especially not when you have access to a card like Silvera, which flips their monsters all face down. Like, so nice synchro deck when you have face down monsters. So Secret Village is really good in that matchup. It's also really good against Yubel because it stops all their starters, like the summoning beast spell card with like opening the spirit gates. It stops that, stops Nightmare Throne, it stops Nightmare Pain. Like they have a lot of spell cards that they cannot use. And it's okay against Snake Eyes because you can stop Bonfire 1, which does cut their starters / extenders in half. But then also you're able to stop cards like Temple, as well as any other non-engine that they might have been adding that could be a spell as well. So really good there. And then the final card that I'm playing in the side deck is a copy of Dimensional Barrier, which I felt that I only needed one copy because again I can just loop it over and over with Diabel and still have space for everything else. So I don't even need to draw it actually. I can dump it with Beatrice, add it back and set it. That came up round 6 for me against Tearlament. So as a Tearlament player, unfortunately he did not play hand traps and I was going first one game, so I was able to just dump the barrier and then add it back to the hand. And the crazy thing is that Astellar plus any spell or trap allows you to send any card in your deck to the graveyard and add it back with Diabel. That's it. Diabel and any spell or trap. That's not using, like, it's not like Astellar plus Engraver or Astellar plus like Planet, which are both absurd combos themselves, but just any spell or trap plus Astellar. So it means you're getting barriered, it means you're getting Secret Villaged, it means you could be getting Zombie Worlded, Anti-Spell Fragranced, Skill Drain. Like any of those could happen off of the simple resolution of a single Astellar effect. Again, that is why this is the best card in the deck. And that's without toy box cards or, you know, any of the other shenanigans. Well, you do use the Fiendsmiths. That's certainly a level of shenanigans, of course, but you don't have to like draw them though. Alright, and so let's go ahead and get into the combos. In this video, I'm just going to show you the basic combos with Astellar plus 1 spell or trap, but I'm going to do a full combo guide later on where I'm going to show you like Astellar plus Engraver, and Astellar plus Pressured Planet, Astellar plus 2 spell or traps. Like there's so many other combos that you can do in this deck that is way too much for, you know, this one particular video. So definitely stay tuned for that. Like this video and subscribe to the channel so you get notified when I do upload the full combo guide. But for now, I am going to show you Astellar plus 1 spell or trap. I'm going to show you like a safe way to do it, as well as like a more aggressive way to do it, because you can use this to end on like a standard end board of like Diabel, both spells or trap, both white 4 spell or traps like Tails and Woes. But then you can also have maybe an Appaloosa, you might have your Fiendsmith combo, so that might be a Dias Array or something else. Or you can use this same combo setup to send any spell or trap to the graveyard, add it back to your hand, and then play that. So it might be like a Secret Village, a Skill Drain, Anti-Spell, Dimensional Barrier. So this combo can really be pretty much whatever you want it to be, depending on how risky you want to play it. And I'm going to show you guys the safe way to do it, and then the more dangerous way of doing things. So let's go ahead and get into it. We're going to start with just normal summon Astellar, activate the effect, send your spell or trap to the graveyard. We're just using Birth for example for this, but it can be any spell or trap. And then we're going to special summon your copy of Sylvie. Now with Sylvie's effect, we're going to search Woes of the White Forest, and I'm going for Woes early here because if you were to get hit by Droll, it's much better to have this in your hand than to have Tails, which would do literally nothing in that case. So search for Woes. Again, this is the safe way of doing this combo. Now from here, you will special summon your tuner, or special summon with your tuner and non-tuner into Arciella. Now activate Arciella's effect, discarding the Woes, and then that's going to search your copy of Tails. So add Tails to your hand. And then now in the new chain, this is the graveyard. New chain, we're going to have a Stellar Chain Link 1, Woes Chain Link 2 to reset itself. So Woes will be set onto the field, special summon Stellar. Alright, again, set card is Woes. So now from here, we activate our Tails of the White Forest. This can search a copy of LZ. Now we will synchro again into Diabel. Now on summon, Diabell's effect can add back our copy of Tails. So here's our 5th summon. We had Astellar, Sylvie, Arciella, Astellar, and now Diabell. If our opponent were to nib here, which would be honestly clearly a bad spot to do so, it's just one monster. If they were to nib us here, we would still have a special summon from our hand, we would still have a special summon from the graveyard with the Sylvie effect, so we'd still be in a really good spot. And that's sort of how this deck and how this combo is safer. It plays through Nibiru by having much more follow-up afterwards. So you're not going to be negating nib with like an early Appaloosa or anything, but it's just like if your opponent did nib you, you still end on a pretty good board. But from here, we could keep playing by activating LZ's effect, sending the Tails to the graveyard, and then LZ can search us a copy of Rucia. Now because we control another white forest monster, we can special summon the Rucia, and we have the option to use Rucia's, oh, I'm sorry, whoa, here you gotta reset the Tails. That's important. But we have the option of using Rucia's effect here. We could send Tails to the graveyard for an extra draw. It's up to you. Sometimes I like keeping the Tails just because it's a very efficient card to use with Diabell. So like on your opponent's turn, or even on this turn, if your opponent activates a card or effect, you can send Tails to the graveyard, or not on this turn, but you can use Diabell to send Tails, and then Diabell's effect will resolve, then Tails can reset itself, so you're not really losing anything, and you're effectively special summoning a synchro tuner for free. Obviously it wouldn't be free on this turn because you would lose the Tails because it's already reset itself once, but on your opponent's turn you can kind of just keep infinitely using cards for free, and that's what I use Tails for most of the time after this initial combo. I'm just like using it for an effect, resetting it, next turn use it for an effect, reset it, and it just makes your plays more efficient than they naturally are. But so you don't have to use this effect, you can if you want. The only other thing to be mindful of is the number of spells in your graveyard. So we started with a spell, we do play Celine, so we started with a spell. If you use Rucia's effect, you'll have 2 spells in the graveyard, and there is another way to get a 3rd spell in the graveyard if you want to make that specific play. So that's an option too. You could use it just to get that spell in grave, but you don't have to, once again. But now we have a level 2 non-tuner, level 8 non-tuner, and a level 4 tuner. So we have access to level 6 synchros, level 12 synchros, or we could even do like a Chaos Angel with 2 non-tuners. So a couple of different options here, but I think the best of which is to just go for everyone's favorite generic Link 2 monster right now, Moon of the Closed Heaven. I'm going to push these back to kind of make room for everything else in the frame here. Let's see. You guys are going to have to bear with me here. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. Moon of the Closed Heaven. So yeah. Then we can go Moon of the Closed Heaven into our Requiem. Activate Requiem's effect to go into Engraver. Now we have a couple of options here as well. We can go into Necroquip, use Engraver effect to bring itself back, and then play from there. But I think the safer way to do this is to actually use either Sylvie or Rucia's effect in the graveyard to summon themselves back. So we can, for example, use Sylvie. Shuffle back the Arciella, bring back the Sylvie, and now we still have two Light Fiends in the graveyard, which is important. Link these off into copy of Sequence. And now we can activate Sequence's effect. And we can go for either Disarray, or we can go to Lacrima, bring back Engraver, go into Appaloosa. Either one of those really works. It just kind of depends on how you want to do this. So like, let's say we want to end on Appaloosa. We could shuffle back the Moon and the Requiem. Go into Lacrima, revive Engraver, and then these 4 can go into 3 material Appaloosa. So you've got 3 monster negates, and if your opponent tries to attack over it, you can always just use like Woes or Diabell's effect, depending on like the timing. Go into Silvera, and whatever your opponent would try to attack over this with, you can just flip into face down defense. So like, let's say your opponent summons Black Witch, Diabell Star the Black Witch, right? Activate Diabell Star effect. Chain Link 2, Diabell effect, send something to the graveyard, special summon Silvera, flip it face down. Now they don't have a face up to send with the original, and they don't have their monster to attack over the Appaloosa. So you wouldn't even need to negate with Appaloosa anymore. That's the crazy thing. I mean, you still could, but you don't have to. So this is actually a really tough board for a lot of decks to out. The other thing you can do is you can use Diabell more than once. So like, let's say, who knows what your opponent does? Use Diabell, send Tails, summon Silvera, flip their board face down, reset the Tails. Now your opponent has some extenders, they keep going. Now you activate your Tails. Tails can special summon, or let's do Chain Link 1 Tails, Chain Link 2 Sylvie or Rucia. Sylvie or Rucia can bounce Silvera back to the extra deck. Then you can special summon, doesn't really matter, but let's say an LZ from your deck. And then you can synchro again into Silvera, which is not once per turn, and then Book of Eclipse their board again. And then because you special summoned a Spellcaster Tuner, you can add LZ back to your hand. If you summoned it with Diabell, like earlier in the combo, doesn't really matter, but you could special summon a Astellar back. There's so many different ways that you can do this and keep recurring your resources. So this deck is highly efficient in how you make your plays. Also, I almost forgot to show you guys, but if your opponent does have Nibiru, this is what you would do in the situation in which they use it, like here, before you go into like an obvious Appaloosa. So they would nib you here, you would lose your whole board, and let's say I don't have a token on hand, just gonna grab like, let's say this is the nib token, right? And they have Nibiru. Well, we never used Engraver's effect, so we can shuffle back the Lacrima, summon out Engraver, sequence effect to equip to Engraver, Engraver effect, send sequence to the graveyard, send the Nibiru to the graveyard, right? Next, we can link away the token and Engraver into Lina. Lina can revive the Nibiru. And then if you like, you can summon back the Rucia by shuffling back Diabell. Back Diabell, go Rucia. And now you can link these into 3 material Appaloosa. So even though your opponent was able to Nibiru you at a pretty good time, you're still able to clear the nib while also setting up a 3 material Appaloosa. That's pretty good. And then you could also do it if you had a third spell engrave, but we only had 2 in that scenario, or even just 1. We had the 1 spell in the grave because we have the set copy of the Tails. But again, if we had drawn the card off of Rucia, then this would be engraved to be 2, and then we could have made like an M7 play to then also get tracked in the graveyard to make 3. So it's definitely possible if you want to do it that way. Now if we go back a little bit, another play that I like to make from here is to go ahead and just to equip the Requiem to Engraver. Equip the Requiem, and now contact Fuse into Necroquip. Use the Engraver effect to shuffle back the Moon. Bring back the Engraver. Now we go M7. M7 effect can detach and then add the Engraver. Then activate the Engraver's effect to get your copy of Tracked. Activate Tracked. Search for Luri, discard Luri, summon Luri. And now these 2 can go for the Sequentia. So now here, activate Sequentia's effect, shuffle back the Luri and the Requiem. With that, we go into Lacrima, Lacrima effect, revive Engraver, and now use Track's Graveyard effect, banish itself, and then fuse these 3 into Desiree, and sequence Graveyard effect to equip. So this is a different end board that I like a lot. And I like this because it gives you control over both monsters and spells or traps, because Desiree is an Omnigate. So with the Appaloosa board, sure you can stop monsters, but a Dark Hole, Raigeki, Lightning Storm would be quite bad. But with a hand like this, you could actually negate a board wipe, and that's actually really good. You could negate a Dark Ruler no more. So, well, and the way you would do that is just by like chaining woes. But I like that play a lot because again, you have Omni Negate, you have Diabel, which can still summon out Silvera for Book of Eclipse. You got Woes to summon out another Silvera for another Book of Eclipse. If you need more monster negation, you could also summon Arciella. Arciella can search for Valor. So if you definitely want a more monster negation more than the Book of Eclipse effect, you could do that. So you have a lot of options here. And now in this combo, if your opponent were to use Nibiru at the absolute worst time for you, which would be at the end of the combo now where you have no monster negates, we've already used Engraver, we've already used Sequence, both Sequence effects. Even if they were to Nibiru here, we still would be able to use both Rucia and Sylvie's Graveyard effects. So we'd have the Nibiru token plus 2 more monsters to keep playing from there. So you're still able to do quite a lot, even through Nib with this deck. Now I'm going to show you guys the riskier way to play this out. And the riskier way is going to allow us to send any Speller Trap we want to the graveyard with Beatrice and then to add it back with Diabel, which is very, very powerful, especially in games 2 or 3 when you have sided cards in your deck. But this is the way you do that. It's a little more vulnerable to hand traps, definitely, but it's worth the payoff if you have something to add back with it. So starts off the exact same way. Normal summon a Stellar, activate a Stellar effect, discarding your Speller Trap, and then special summoning a copy of Sylvie. Now, in the last combo, we started by searching Woes in case of Droll, but in this combo, we can't do that because with Tails, you're using both Tails effect in your combo, right? You're using the effect to search as well as the effect to reset itself. Well, we're relying on Diabel to add it back to hand to get to that other effect. But in this case, we're using Diabel for something else, so we have to kind of sequence things a little bit differently, which does leave us vulnerable to a card like Droll and Lockbird. But so with Sylvie, we're going to be searching our copy of Tails. If our opponent has Droll here, we are really hurt, but we synchro both of these into Arciella effect, discard the Tails. Now we're going to search for the copy of Woes. Same as before, Chainlink 1 Astellar, Chainlink 2 Tails. I just put them back on the field in the opposite order, but you guys know what I mean. And now instead of synchroing right now into Diabel, we're going to wait a bit until we can actually do our Fiendsmith combo. So again, Tails is in hand, the set card is, or Woes is in hand, the set card is Tails, activate Tails, and then that's going to get us to our LZ. Now Tails goes to the graveyard, so this is already a far less efficient play even moving forward because you don't have that free recursion off of the Tails because we've used both effects and let it go to the grave, and we're not getting it back with Diabel. But nonetheless, the inboard is more powerful because we are going to extend further by activating LZ's effect, sending the Woes to the graveyard, and then searching out a copy of Rucia. New chain, Woes will reset itself. Now we're going to special summon out the Rucia. Same as before, link both of these away into our Moon of the Closed Heaven. I was like, what is it called? Moon of the what? Moon of the Closed Heaven. Moon, being a generic light fiend monster, will allow us to go into Requiem. Requiem's effect will tribute itself to special summon out a copy of Engraver. And now because Tails is in the graveyard, we are going to be able to guarantee that third spell. So we are going to make the M7 play. So we're going to equip the Requiem, Contact Fuse into Necroquip. Now activate the Engraver's effect, shuffle back Moon, summon out the Engraver, overlay for M7. And we could just go Beatrice here. Like, this could just be Beatrice, send the Speller Trap, make Diabel, add it back, but there's so much more we can do with this play if we just keep going. Obviously, this does take a lot more extra deck space, though, because we have to play cards like M7. But nonetheless, M7 effect, detach Engraver, add back Engraver, discard Engraver. To search for Attract, activate Tract effect. Search for Lori, discard Lori, special summon out the Lori. Luri and M7 can go into Sequence. sequence effect, shuffle back the Lurie and the Requiem. That's going to allow us to summon out Lacrima. Lacrima effect, revive out the Engraver. Overlay Lacrima and Engraver into Beatrice. And now from here, Beatrice effect can send any spell or trap you want to the graveyard. If it's just like a game 1, if it's game 1, this play probably isn't worth the risk. But if it is and you still wanted to do it, Dominus Purge is like not a bad thing to send, I guess. That or Imperm. So we'll dump Dominus Purge to the graveyard. And then from here, we make the Diabell. Diabell can then add back the Dominus Purge. We can set that. So we've got Purge and Woes set. We've got Sequence, Beatrice, and Diabell. But we can keep going. So looking at our graveyard, we've got 1 Synchro. And then we have still the Rusia and Sylvia effects that we haven't used yet. If our opponent nibbed us, it would get this in the grave. We could use that too, but hopefully they don't nib us though. But we can go ahead and use either one's effect. Let's say Rusia, shuffle back the Arciella. Now we could go into a 3 material Appaloosa here, but if we want to keep the Beatrice, which does still have some value on the opponent's turn, we can send another trap to the graveyard for the Purge, or we could send something else for more follow-up on the next turn. Kind of just depends on how we want to do things, but if you want to keep, this could be Appaloosa, or this can just be a copy of Selene. And then we have, let's see, Tract, Tails, and the original spell that we discarded in the graveyard. So we've got three counters. We can special summon back a spellcaster on either player's turn even, so we could special summon back, I guess in this case it doesn't really matter, but like your Synchro Tuner monsters trigger when special summoned, not when Synchro summoned. So if you had like a Silvera or the Arciella still in grave, you could just summon them back with Selene and get their effects like that as well. But in this case, we are just going to use the effect on our own turn, bring back whatever thing we want to bring back, and then go into Appaloosa. So that's the end of this combo that ends in Appaloosa, Beatrice. It is a Dominus Purge here, but this could be literally any spell or trap in the game. So, you know, take that for what it is. Woes plus Diabell, so we still have double Book of Eclipse if we'd like, assuming we have another spell or trap in hand that we could send for the effect of Diabell. That's the only thing. When you make this play, when you lose out on that copy of Tails in favor of some other spell or trap that you don't want to send with Diabell, obviously, you still need something to send for the effect. And so that can get kind of tricky. You do have the Tails that you can send, but if you send it off of Tails and it resets itself, you can't activate it on that same turn. So you're not getting 2 Silvera effects. Likewise, if you activate Woes, you can't like chain Diabell to your own Woes to like also send it either. So it's tricky. Effectively with this combo, you're not getting 2 Silvera effects, you're only getting 1. So you got to use it wiser. So instead of getting 2 Book of Eclipses, you got 1, but you have 2 monster negates plus any other spell or trap. It kind of weighs itself out in a sense. But alright guys, that is basically 2 different ways that you can do the most basic combo in this deck, being Astellar plus any spell or trap in the game. There are ways that you can play it safe and still end on a really good board, or you can go super risky and end on something like this, like Appaloosa with multiple monster negates, Beatrice that's live, Diabell, any spell or trap you want, and Woes, so you have access to the Book of Eclipse effect, you have access to so much more. But let me know how you guys would do this combo, which one you think is better, what you're doing with your White Forest decks. Are you doing Calamity Lock? Are you doing, you know, some other shenanigans? I know there are other combos where you can use the level 4s to go into rank 4s like Dweller, Baguska, Gallant Granite to search out Nibiru, then you can use the Arciella earlier to search the Veiler, so you have Nib plus Veiler. There are so many different ways that you can play White Forest, and I want to see how you guys are playing it as well. Now, I'm also going to do a much more in-depth and longer combo guide on the channel, because this video ain't enough. There's so much more you can do if you have like Planet plus Astellar, or Engraver plus Astellar, or all 3, or other combinations of stuff, what you can do with LZ, what you can do if you have multiple spell and traps. There's so many more ways that you can play these lines out, and so I definitely want to show you guys something a bit more a bit more detailed. And so let me know what you guys think about that. If you want to see that, definitely like this video and subscribe to the channel so you'll be notified when I do upload that. And now if you're watching this far enough into the future, that detailed combo guide will be right here on the screen in the end cards. But if it's not quite there yet, this will be the most relevant video on the channel for you. So definitely check that out and be sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video for more amazing content. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.